All right. Okay. I think we're on. Okay. Hi, Vida. How are you
Hi,
doing?
I'm good. How are you
Good,
doing?
good. So glad we were finally able to get together for this conversation. Um, and for my listeners too, I just wanted to I'm just really happy to be able to share this with you guys. I know many of you have been watching a couple of the lives that I've done on talking about the telepathy tapes. And what I wanted to go over today with my friend Vida is we really wanted to talk more in depth on this intersection between neurocomplexity and spirituality. Because kind of like in parallel, we were just talking and we're having one of our own conversations, and a lot of these topics started really coming together. And it just feels like we're at a moment now when these areas are really coming together. And definitely with the Telepathy Tapes podcast, which is now gaining a lot more visibility as they are making this into a documentary. I just thought it would be really cool to maybe go over some parts of the conversation that we've had, which go into topics like, the link between our creative and spiritual gifts, um, talking about the role of empathy, especially in regard to neurocomplexity, neurodiversity, because it often gets disregarded in a certain way. And this issue of shared consciousness, and basically, integration is a huge theme. So we might end up really winding our way around in and out of a lot of these topics. But I think if we touch on half of what we already have, it should be really exciting. So with that in mind, I just want to pseudo informally introduce Vida here. She's a friend of mine, and she is a gifted trauma healing and recovery specialist and spiritual mentor. And you've done all sorts of really cool things. You've run yoga studios. Working on doing a lot of guided meditations. And yeah, and you've also been doing a lot of work recently with neurocomplexity and thinking through some of these topics as well. So I don't know, where should we get started on this? Do we want to talk about the telepathy tapes, the neurocomplexity? Which way should we dive into this first?
I don't know. Maybe we can start with telepathy tapes. I have watched the last episode. I believe that was the ninth one. And yeah, you can go ahead because you
Yeah,
a
I
lot more
mean,
about it, and I can just add to it.
yeah, I feel like for anyone who's still new to the podcast, if you take a listen, just if you only have time for one, I mean, take a look at episode 9. That's really where a lot of these different issues really come together. Um, And basically, it just to quickly recap, if you haven't seen it yet, this is a podcast about on the surface level, it follows non-speaking autistic kids who also have very clear demonstrated abilities, which we would consider telepathy. That's the concept we use. But the show really goes much deeper than that because it goes beyond the limitations of this concept of telepathy because so much more is going on. And I really became interested because it seems like it's not really about the autism or even the non-speaking aspect of things, but it's just they are a really good case study for it. And yeah, so and in I think it was I also episode 6 maybe they go into also animal telepathy discussions with Rupert Sheldrake, morphic fields, and he's done some specific work in animal telepathy. So again, it goes way beyond just what the autistic kids were experiencing. But yeah, what were your reactions, Vida, when you first listened to it? A lot of it just felt really familiar, did it?
Yeah, exactly. I kind of self-diagnosed myself with autism. Obviously, I'm verbal, I'm speaking, but a lot of things that they were talking about, it felt really, really familiar. especially that being able to talk to people through the mind. Sometimes I do feel that I can read people's minds. It's not I can tell exactly what they're thinking about, but I can tell what they're about in a way, and then feel people on much deeper level. So maybe that's something to do with empathy as well, just like being able to relate to people on a deeper level. And obviously it relates with giftedness as well. So I think what we talked about before, that the autism, the giftedness, it really kind of overlaps in many ways. And for me, sometimes it's very hard to actually distinguish which traits of mine belongs to giftedness, which traits belongs to autism. Um, and yeah, I believe that like all the topics they were touching upon, that connection with a higher spirit or like higher source or like that consciousness, that's very familiar to me as well. I use that in the healings I do, because that's kind of that's how I download the information, and that's how I get the questions, which comes through the I don't know, the spirit, the higher consciousness, God, whatever you want to call it. But I feel that connection, and I can kind of download and hear and feel whatever is coming through me. So I don't know. Probably that's part of the giftedness, I suppose, or that's part of the autism. I don't know which one to kind of put it to the traits, but I believe that's one of the things which I really related when I listened
Hmm.
to it.
And we were talking also about, yeah, about the overlap in some of these traits and like
Mhm.
how a lot of these diagnoses, I mean, I feel like they seem to be, they're in motion. They've definitely already evolved, like over, if you compare like the last decade, 2 decades, 3 decades. And the area of giftedness or the concept of giftedness really is definitely under discussed. And there's a lot more going on there because as we've said, like there are overlapping aspects with, the more visible or more like the areas of neurodivergence that have been given more attention. And but there's so much of it that overlaps with just like creative gifts and then more of our intuitive gifts or spiritual gifts. And it feels like that's like an like a separate dimension on all of these other traits. So I guess what it raises for me is also how we also don't really have like a really good understanding yet of intuition and how that really works because as you said, like there's like a whole spectrum of sensitivity or receptivity and there's, intuition is like a really rich field where we could be receiving information on many sorts of channels, so to speak. And we were talking too about how this also relates to maybe to our relationship with the body. um as some of the kids or maybe it was like their parents in the telepathy tapes mentioned, some of them didn't have a very strong feeling of being located in their body, which was a very interesting thing to hear about. And some of the researchers were asking whether that was somehow linked maybe to their gifts. And it seemed like in some of what we were talking about that this could be related to, we talk about spiritual amnesia and the fact that we are living here with under a huge veil and we have to do a lot of work of remembering our spiritual nature, remembering our larger relationship with consciousness. And so, yeah, it's about how much we're still in touch with this aspect. And I guess concepts like empathy and intuition, maybe that's the closest we have so far for describing that ability to like get through the veil again.
Yeah, and I believe that disconnection from the body is also important. Well, it's important to a certain degree because yeah, it when you're disconnected from your body, when you're dissociated from your body, and for most of the spiritual people, actually comes through very deep trauma experienced in the childhood. But more disconnected you are from the body, it's easier to connect with the higher realms. At least through my experience, it's almost like the deeper the trauma, the more disturbing trauma, more disconnection from the body is happening. And I believe, but that's my own theory, that in order for us to actually not like transmute, but I don't know, to almost manifest those gifts, we do need to reconnect back to our body back. But the first thing, how we learn about it, that's why we had experienced such trauma, most of us. So we can easier connect with the higher realms. So it's almost like you don't have a body, and you just communicate with the higher source, with God, with universe, however you want to call it. But then I think the task for most of us, for most of the gifted people, for most spiritual people, is actually to connect back to the body. And I think that's how we can manifest things in a reality, in the physical reality, in the material reality. But I think that's what we should be really doing, connecting back to our body, because we can touch upon the intuition as well, because the way I feel intuition is actually through my body. I can feel the intuition through my body. So for example, if someone's energy is not aligning with mine, or I feel something, normally some part of my body is actually reacting to it. So more I connected, I connected with my body. That was done through yoga, especially. More I was becoming more intuitive, and actually my gifts started to become sharper as well, and I can use them a little bit better. So I don't know if it's more like was more to do with the healing of the trauma, or connecting the body, or everything is actually connected all together. Then connecting to my intuition, and being able to connect with the higher realms.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it makes sense, in the sense of like we're kind of like closing the loop between bringing in this higher information and then like actualizing it, which is, if that's presumably the point of this 3D experience. Um, and then it raises the question too of like different levels of intuition in the body, because we already we sort of have like these hardwired instincts, like when we hear people say things like listen to your gut. And I
Yeah,
feel I've noticed that that's not always what people think it should mean, because that can really, I feel like that really pertains more to like our lower energy centers in some
yeah,
sense. Like it's often about like warning us of danger, or warning us, maybe we get a feeling of disgust or something. We have each our own signature
yeah,
for how it can appear to us, how that signal appears to us. That I've definitely felt that very strongly in my own life, very distinct episodes where I would get that sensation and I would avoid a place or a location, and it would be very visceral. Like that would be listening to your gut, literally. And
mm,
so I wouldn't, um, I already had some message in advance of like, oh, stay away from this person. But I feel like that's different from maybe receiving like higher levels of intuition,
yeah,
where maybe it's more like we're being pulled um towards, some aspect that we want to like cultivate, or do you know what I'm trying to say? Like it's a different type of
yeah,
process.
yeah. Yeah, it could be, and I think it's also related a little bit with the healing of the trauma. Safer we feel in the body, more, maybe not like higher, we can connect with the higher realms of intuition, because we feel safe. So we don't need to, to be overly conscious of what's actually happening around us if we need to actually protect ourselves, having that gut instinct that someone is not safe. And also I think in some ways that if we haven't healed the trauma, we can actually have a distorted intuition. So some situation might be completely safe, but because of a dysregulated nervous system, we might perceive it as a threat. Although it's, I think that's what the instinct is more than the intuition. And more we heal, more we kind of become safer in our bodies, then I think we can really connect with the higher realms, with the higher consciousness, and then start to follow our path more than just be in that anxious state where we just kind of protecting ourselves.
Yeah, so maybe it's even an evolution of our ability, of our instinct, as you say. I hadn't made that connection in this specific way. Yeah, but yeah, definitely like the feeling of safety. Um, but also I think many of these different types of signals coming in as needed, like being conversant in this language, we can receive all on all of these different registers. Yeah, and so this goes back maybe now to, this is how we started this topic, actually, this conversation on manifestation, because we hear a lot of, maybe in popular areas, like manifesting a specific thing, like a specific
Mhm.
partner, you want to manifest this right job and all of this. And
Yeah.
this was really like what the way you put it one day was like a huge kind of insight, or like, wow, I hadn't really heard it in that way before. But I think you said something like it's more about like once we're actually aligned with like our higher self, let's say at the moment, when we're aligned in this like really very holistic and integrated way, then we manifest exactly what we need for that version of who we are then, or something. And it was just the way you said it was like really powerful and clarifying. So
Yeah, I think I think I said that there's no point of manifesting anything specifically, because we're manifesting then from our ego, what we think we want with our limited mind. And it can be, I don't know, it can be a specific job, it can be, I don't know, the partner, or it can be, I don't know, anything else, like living in a certain area or city, or even the country. But in my own experience, and then I realized that actually I'm really good manifester, because I manifested pretty much everything what I wanted. But the moment I got it, I was like, I don't want it anymore. It's misaligned already.
wow.
Because yeah, it was some hilarious situations, but I think when we're manifesting something, we're getting it from, yeah, when we manifesting it, we are in certain vibrational state. But when we get it, that state might be completely different already, because it can be like 2 days, it can be a month, it can be a year. And once we got it already, we think, okay, maybe it's not that we want it. And also, I think it's something to do with the manifesting from the ego. It's not manifesting from the soul alignment or integrity. So I think that's why when we get it, we don't. In my case, in many cases, I didn't even recognize it, that I manifested something, because it was just not what I wanted already at the time in the future. Because I think, yeah, it's kind of complicated to explain it, because the only manifestation which is valid is right here, right now, if we're manifesting like that. I
This
think
is
that's
where
the,
we were getting
yeah,
really
yeah, that's
metaphysical.
where we
Like,
went
this is like
eventually.
talking about timelines and versions of ourselves, and like
Mm.
depending on the level of frequency we're bringing in. Um, yeah, it's really, this is like the mind expanding moment, because we're always in touch in some degree or not from like our, let's say, let's call it maybe our integral self, our higher aspects, or higher dimension that is already in touch with all parts of consciousness of who we are. And then so from moment to moment, we're either like further or closer to that, like more aligned with it. And yeah, I mean, it sounds simple from that perspective,
Yeah,
but
but it's not, it's not simple.
so Yeah, and then it links into with like the body and with density, because this is now where we start touching on this topic of maybe the fields that we have in common. So oh, where to start? So for people who already know, like for example, Rupert Sheldrake, you know about the concepts of morphic fields, and a lot of people now know about quantum entanglement. But the thing is, like I've studied this a bit more academically, but quantum entanglement is like, yeah, it's really suggestive. It's a very powerful metaphor, but it's not really the most accurate type of metaphor anymore at this point. Like it doesn't necessarily generalize to what we call the macro level, although there are like suggestive parallels because we do see a lot of strange effects, but they're not necessarily specifically related to quantum entanglement, which is just like you're just dealing with two photons or two electrons, etc. But we're more dealing with like fields, which are like aggregates of many, like millions, billions of these kinds of interactions. So the questions is like, how are these fields really interacting? And there's so many different approaches out there for like how to align with certain fields that may not be like your own. They may be, again, it's these questions of like boundaries. What are the boundaries between these fields? Like, how are we on that level distinguishing between, this is me and my higher self versus this is you and your higher self, or we're accessing a shared space? Like, what's defining, the difference between these? Because obviously, it feels like at some level of density, maybe it starts to differentiate, or at some level of higher frequency, perhaps it maybe these start to merge a little bit more. So it just raises those kinds of metaphysical questions. But I feel like if we start understanding things on that level, that's where it starts to explain all these phenomena that down here in this density, they look so separate and different, right? Like, why are mice healing on their own from a distance from people who don't even know that they're healing them? Or how is, that one autistic kid who he chose to pass back into non-physical, like it was very conscious, and then he was sending messages back to a woman who would deliver the messages later, so it was kind of like there's a retro causal element too, like going back in time. And all of these start to make sense more if we start taking that perspective of there's these shared fields. But for me, it just raises the question of like what's distinguishing the fields. And I think maybe it's about the level of the frequency that you're on, if that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah, I believe that as well, and maybe that answers the question. Remember when we said that it's so much easier to talk with the gifted people
Oh,
rather
yeah.
than than neurotypicals, because maybe that answers your question. Maybe because it's like we are in the same field, and maybe our fields are connecting, and
Yes.
or like level of vibration. I don't know how else to explain that.
Yeah, no, that's a good reminder. Because I started to ask like what is it about these autistic kids, like this group of kids? Because now we know it's not about the autism. We've seen the
Mm.
so-called telepathy in parrots. Like if you guys listen to that one episode 6, I think she talks about the case of a parrot who, these are all African grays, of course. The parrot was picking up on what the woman was dreaming about at night. Like the parrot slept in her room. So the parrot is verbal. The parrot could speak like human English language. So not autistic, not like non-speaking. The parrot was speaking, and it was picking up on this telepathic connection to the woman's dreams. So what was it about these autistic kids? I just started to wonder if maybe somehow they were like a soul group, and if it's that type of connection, maybe that is more causal and more like that's really the source of this shared ability for their access to this shared consciousness. Um, yeah, and it goes back to what we were saying too about like how we can kind of, and I think it happens within just like autistic community or maybe
Mhm.
ADHD community too, like you like a mutual
Yeah,
recognition.
yeah, absolutely. Um, One person I met, and I think from that person I started to recognize that maybe I am on the spectrum as well, because it was just so easy to communicate. It was just like it was flowing, because one of the main traits of autism, that we take everything literally. We cannot read between the lines. So it was, when he was saying something, I knew that that was exactly what he was meaning, and it was just like really, really easy communication. But I don't know if it's about the the autism itself. I think it's about that, I don't know, the field, the energetic field or quantum field around us, the level of vibration or whatever that is. Because it wasn't only with that person particularly. It was, I can see the pattern. I can definitely see the pattern between people. And equally, it's very difficult for me to connect to people who are completely closed and not spiritual, not gifted. It feels like I'm bumping to the wall, and it's I can be silent. And I think when I started to recognize my gifts, and I started to recognize that I am on the spectrum, and that I'm neurocomplex rather than neurotypical. Um, I think my life became easier because I started to, I don't know, to open up a little bit more and be more authentic, instead of trying to pretend and become certain version I was expected to be. And I don't know. I think that's my answer, if there was a
Mhm.
question.
Yeah, I think I went into three different directions from that already, but yeah, it's the role of empathy where we
Mm.
may be picking up on um like shared ideas or like a shared like what we're both talking about right now. It may not be so much about how we talk about like reading between the lines or even like pattern recognition as just maybe we are like receiving just something like a download instantly and then we're partially translating it into language, each with our own different styles. Um, because yeah, it is about empathy in this sense because some people are more able to communicate or share in a way that's totally distinct from however they're using language anyway. Like, for example, I've read some conversations where people say like, oh, neurodivergent people don't ask questions. Or I've also read though that like some do, and then they're trying to say that that's like this trait that can tell you right away. And I feel like that's on a very superficial level because I feel like it doesn't really depend on that. I mean, it's just like this is a group of people identifying what they have in common here, but it's not necessarily the real like causal factor, if that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
So yeah, but and then giftedness too. I mean, there's specific traits that, yeah, like in myself, for example, I feel like most of how I understand like my own neurocomplexity definitely fits more with like the profile of giftedness that I've experienced and I grew up in. Like I've gone over like, the gifted programs I was in. But yeah, there's definitely elements that overlap with like specific traits that we group under autism or ADHD. But whereas I don't like if I look at more of a profile, like a lot of that actually doesn't really apply to me. And then there's the whole dimension of issues like burnout and like complex trauma, which also like rewire how we're able to respond or not. And so that's also a huge influence. Um, where was I going with this? The question of like pattern recognition, like I see a lot of people talking about that.
Mm.
And for me, also like I come from a really strong visual arts background where pattern, like, of course, pattern recognition is something that I think we all have access to. It's like an innate cognitive ability. That's how we learn language. So I kind of felt a little bit confused when I saw like so much emphasis on that. And I wonder like how much people are, what they really mean is like intuition, getting an intuitive sense of like where something is going. So I don't know. What do you feel about that? Like, does it feel like it's an intuitive thing for you, or how do you like understand when people are talking about that?
I don't know. I think it's slightly deeper than just, just cognitive recognition of something repeating itself. I think I can relate a little bit with the mathematics in certain way, that basically you recognize certain pattern repeating, and then from it you can make a conclusion or something like that. The same way, I've heard somewhere that, for example, if you read, and that was working for me, if you read the summary of the book, you can tell pretty much. You don't need to read the book. You know what it is about, because if you read the book, you're just gonna have the same conclusion out of it. So
Hmm.
it sort of goes both ways. You can take a big text or like big some sort of I don't know, mathematical formulas, and see the pattern going on. That's the same with the speech. So it's kind of related with a really good memory. So you see someone doing exactly the same thing, and it's sort of repeating itself. And I don't know how it kind of correlates in the way that it's very easy to catch someone lying, because it's, yeah, you can see where it's not, it goes out of the pattern, goes out
Hmm.
of out of sequence. So yeah, it goes both ways. You can condense something and then make sort of like a formula out of it, or like something repeating, and the same way you can expand it. But yes, to answer to your question, I think it is intuitive, because it's not like, it is in a way a little bit mathematical, logical, but the whole thing I think is very, very intuitive as well, because those conclusions you make, it's not coming out of some sort of formula as a mathematics. It comes from deeper insight. And in my case, yeah, I had experienced that, like in the human connection, when you say that you've been doing this, and then they said, no, I have not. And you know that it actually was happening, but you have no proof for that. You just know that it was something happening, that pattern was being repeated all the time, but you have no proof to it. So it was a journey for me to actually to trust my intuition, and to trust, that's how I can relate, that it was intuitive. Because not only I was trusting my intuition, that what I remember, that pattern was actually happening, but also to trust my intuition that that person who's telling me otherwise is not correct, in a way.
Hmm.
So it's
So
like
this,
double.
it almost sounds, it's like, this is how I feel like about energy reading. Like if I'm reading energy, this is what this means to me. So definitely it feels more holographic. Um,
Mhm.
as you described it, right? It's like holographic. It's like you've
It
got
is.
like, or, if we want to think about as fractals, right? We can have a little
Mhm.
piece and it's already connected to, in that sense, I guess it's a fractal as a pattern. This is a better way to think about it than,
Mhm.
it's not linear. But yeah, definitely it's almost like if you can get like that, you get that one little piece of the whole, and then you can see, you get the whole from that, if that makes sense. You can abstract to the whole. And I've definitely felt that too, when I can think of a couple of people who maybe I can tell when something energetically, I can tell when it's different. And I'm like, okay, you're withholding something that, not that somebody shouldn't have like their own private like life or something, but it's just in the sense of like, okay, you were like, it's like a lie because it's a type of like omission that
Yeah.
would make a difference for like what was happening. And it's, so
Yeah, yeah, and then yeah, I think what you're saying, that basically even like certain piece of the pattern is missing, you can still make up the pattern, and
yes.
so that's why it's sort of, it's the way, I don't know if I, because I'm very visual, so I can see it. So when you said it's sort of almost holographic, it's, I see it in my head. I don't know how, but I see it, and it's obvious for me. I think that's another, actually that's another topic what we talked about being visual and seeing things and not understanding how other people actually, not like not understanding,
Oh,
but
right. Yes.
it was very very new to me that not everybody is visual and not everybody can visualize.
Yeah, so this is called like aphantasia, I think, like
Hmm.
APH. So some people, I think this used to be like a little folk theory I had. You know how people always say, oh, there's two types of people. And for me, it was always like, okay, it's people who can visualize things, like they get mental pictures, and then other people who don't, like, or maybe it's a spectrum and they would have to work really hard, like really be conscious about like making a mental picture and think about it. And whereas, I don't know, I've got like linguistic and visual kind of, maybe they fluctuate based on different areas, but definitely high visual. And it's very easy for me. Like maybe I don't consider myself psychic in the sense of like, I'm totally like clairvoyant. I know it can be developed, but definitely it's there's something happening with the non-discursive aspects of our brain. So non-discursive meaning not just about like verbal language, but getting into the symbolic, the
Yeah,
pre-discursive areas basically, where not that images are like lower on some hierarchy with language, not at all, but they're actually closer to holography in the sense of like
mm,
they encode more information in a more integrated sense than just language can. And
mm,
so even this is like maybe a weird metaphor, but like even in like IT security, like you get a lot of people talk, like you talk about like redundancy across all your systems. So like you've got like one computer that fails, but you have all of your data is stored over like several computers and you can restore the whole thing, even though you have this one piece that was missing, or the other way around. Like maybe you only have one piece left, but it's like a holographic setup. So from that, you can still restore everything, and it feels like this is connected in an important way
yeah,
to
yeah.
like shared consciousness and these fields.
But yeah, I think that that's a very, very good metaphor about like the shared consciousness and that little piece of the, I don't know how you call it, motherboard, or that information from which was perceived, which was reserved. So yeah, I don't know. I somehow just made a connection from that.
So this is like in the telepathy tapes, they talk about, I think one of them used the metaphor of like being in the cloud, like between like the one of the kids would be able to see what the mother was reading, and they're in totally separate rooms, right? They're so far apart. All of these studies were super controlled, you guys. You'd be insane to want to doubt it. That would be a little bit pathological. But so the kid was seeing exactly what his mother was looking at, and it was instant, as if they would say they had a shared kind of blackboard or a shared canvas, and the mother would get really freaked out because like, what, how does this mean he can access everything in my mind, or is it somehow just what's on this canvas? And then what creates that difference? So for me, this, how we now today, like a lot of people are, some people are like really sincerely like thinking about like, how can we upload our minds into the mind cloud so that we don't need bodies, or we can still like live once our body dies? And it's like, we're already in the cloud, right? Like this, we're already in this cloud platform, and there is a more integrated and richer, denser, or not dense, but integrated aspect of ourselves that isn't just in these little single dense bodies that we can
Yeah.
already access. So it's kind of like we're already in that space, and it feels like another layer of density actually to start to imagine even more cybernetically. Like, let's
Mm,
put our minds in the cloud. Like, let's further densify our brains, basically, because that's what it
yeah.
is. That's not going in a higher frequency direction. That's going in
Yeah.
a way more dense direction.
Hmm.
That's like really crazy, like imagining down even below like the 3D level, it's going into whatever 2D or beyond, actually one dimensional. Like what is one data element? Like it has no
Yeah.
dimensions. So
But it's very egotistical as well to think that, oh, what's in my mind is so powerful and so useful, and I need this to put it to the cloud, when at the end of the day you can just access consciousness, and
right.
there's everything there. You don't need to kind of egotistically preserve your little knowledge, which is
That's
very,
funny.
but this is that it is. We, because that's what we value a lot, that knowledge, but that's not the real knowledge we need, not the one read from the books. It is necessary and it is useful to the certain level, but it's very it's very limited. And I don't think what we need to kind of put our little minds into that little supercomputer, into that cloud, and preserve it, because that's just a tiny, tiny little bit of information, which which we can access the everything.
Yeah, what if it's like some of these people, what if they are their own soul group and their whole desire was to be like, how can we get even more dense than 3D? Like, can we go like 2D, 1D? Like really, it's like a new level of projection further into density.
Yeah, it's like literally like the chip, the little chip, this 1D.
It's
It's
like
not
not
it's a bit.
even. You want to get to the quantum level now with quantum computing because then that would be like a 0D. It's like we're imagining it in the opposite direction. It's like we're here, we've like 3D is enough, okay? We can learn as much as we want to learn. So I don't know, are they like pioneers because they want to go down to 0D and then find their way back?
Yeah, it's for me, it's going backwards completely, instead of expanding your consciousness and actually connecting yourself to the consciousness where everything is, all the information. And now I cannot download not like immediately, but it downloads are not going all the time. But the moments I noticed when actually I was downloading, when I was teaching yoga, all the classes was channeled, because I was instantly connecting to the higher consciousness, and I was never preparing for the classes. The class was literally for the people which was there in the class, and what was coming out of my mind, it was like almost instant channeling.
That's
and
amazing.
and and now, yeah, I have my own ways to do that. Sometimes I don't know what it depends on, maybe on my own vibrational state. I just feel that sometimes it's just coming some messages or some like understanding or knowledge, and I believe that also kind of guides us to our path, what we're supposed to be doing in here, and what lessons we're supposed to be learning, that like soul contract or whatever you want to call it. And I think that's one of the most important things. And then through that, more we are connected, more we are intuitive, more we can hear clear, and receive those downloads, more we can actually step into the path, what we supposed to be doing in here, or what kind of messages we're supposed to be conveying to the wider audience. And that's for me completely decentralized and completely unegotistical, because it's not about you anymore. It's more about sharing the knowledge, which you download to the people who are maybe not even able to download yet. But then you share that information that is possible, and it's actually accessible to almost everyone. And obviously we can argue about it, we can discuss that as well, but in my theory it's actually almost everybody should be able to do that, but it depends on a lot of things.
Mhm. Yeah, this is fascinating because it does go back to that metaphor of maybe somebody doesn't have, so there's spiritual amnesia no matter what, but
Mm,
then maybe somebody also has, their brain, something physiologically is literally like maybe, something happened, there's damage to the
mm,
neurophysiological level. Yet this is why we also know why the mind is not equal to the brain. It's not reducible to just what's happening with the brain because I mentioned in one of my other lives too, like at least two, there's many cases, but there's two really good cases that really prove like it falsifies this idea because people who, for example, with like really, really heavy dementia, like often at the very end of their life in their last hours, there's something called terminal lucidity and it's rare, but then they will all of a sudden have complete access to now they remember everybody, they remember everybody's names, they start having conversations that are like, you don't have any brain damage. And it's like, what's going on there? Because if the mind really
mm.
was just the brain, just this set of neurons, right? And they're damaged. So yeah, so the mind is not just equal to the brain, and that's why this whole like movement towards thinking that you're uploading your brain. I mean, we know now, like it goes back to how people thought it goes back to the 1940s, right? Where that's when they made this connection between these like logical gates and the way neurons apparently worked, right?
Mm,
So number one, like logic goes way beyond binary logic. That's called baby logic, right? Logic is like this huge field. It's way more interesting than zero and one. And number two, um, it's where was I saying? Like the mind is not just like reducible to the brain. So and then the other element in there was that everybody was trying to think like, oh, now it's just the neurons. That's exactly what they do, right? They operate in this like zero and one type of patterning. But the brain itself, if you want to care about the brain, like it's so much more than just what the neurons are doing. There's all these other types of cells in there that have not even been studied yet. So we don't even really know what the brain is. It's ridiculous to further pursue this level of reductionism, like unless you're working on like specific neuronal health, which is fine, but that's not like where the mind is. It's not even just an epiphenomenon of like what all the neurons are doing, because as we've seen with these cases, like the terminal lucidity. So with these people, this like movement towards thinking that they're going to like upload their minds, I mean, that's not really what's going to happen anyway. And I just wonder where that line of evolution is really going to go. Is it just going to cancel itself out? Because at that level, like if you really were just data anyway, I mean, it's just easy to delete it. So
yeah,
I don't
yeah,
know what they think there would be achieving with that anyway. Like you would be just creating this very, very dense simulacra of what was already just a density. Like,
yeah. Yeah, but for me it doesn't make sense now. It's for some reason now I just made a connection with AI. So it's almost like all those little individual minds in one like field of the AI. But that's I don't know, that doesn't make sense because it's yeah, it's us who we are. It's not mind. The mind is for me, the mind is what we know, what we read, what we experience, and also that overlaps with emotions as well. It's not just like the pure mind. So yeah, I don't know. And one more thing, when you were talking about the brain, I don't think I'm gonna say it scientifically, but I was my dissertation, MA dissertation was on heart space. So there's studies and research done that actually the heart has its own brain, the neurons and all sorts of things. So it then where we go with this theory that our mind is only the brain, when our heart actually has its own little brain, and they're communicating with one another and connected to like the field, to electromagnetic field. Our brain is producing like kind of tiny electromagnetic field, and our heart is producing huge electromagnetic field. Obviously, depends on your own heart frequency, but well, yeah. So I don't.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I don't know where they're going with this movement. I don't think they're gonna go very far with it.
Yeah, it's just becoming, it's narrower and narrower and narrowing, and it's definitely overlooking all of our other energy centers, our other channels for reception.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's a good reminder too, like about the type of intelligence that can come through the heart space as an energy center. Um, yeah, so I think just to go back a little bit when you brought up AI, and of course, I find it's very interesting that we're at this moment where both of these trajectories are kind of like really advancing or even coming together with, especially with now we're hearing a lot more about like the AI hallucinations and and then also like this new focus on these gifts of like telepathy, the clairvoyance and everything. And um I just feel like there's a mirroring element here. Like, I don't think it's random that we are kind of, this is happening at the same moment. It's kind of like two parallel trajectories that I don't know if they need to like meet each other to like confront each other or something. But, there's a lot of people who are think that like AI is, that just consciousness is already exactly what AI can do anyway. If you've already reduced mind to just a series of like 0 and 1 type of logic channels, then it makes sense that you would think like, well, of course AI could be conscious, but we know that's completely ridiculous. That's not what consciousness is in the first place. So, and a lot of the reception of the chatbots in particular, right? Because there's like 8 different types of AI, and this chatbot is like what's getting attention right now is like projection, right? Like it's an imitation machine, and
Yeah.
then we project into it because this is a very deep technology that we have, like as 3D humans. Like language is probably one of our oldest technologies, like going back to like the origins of like working with fire and everything, and dance and movement. It's very linked with our bodies, although obviously in like these chatbots, it's not. It's just an abstracted like logic game, basically. So I don't know what like the full significance of that is, but I feel like, like an AI is not going to develop or cultivate these telepathic abilities.
No.
Although it's sometimes it seems weird with the way some algorithms work. Like I wonder sometimes in my like Instagram, like I've been thinking about something and not like it's not anything I've interacted with in Instagram at all. But then like, in the explore or like the whatever else might come up in suggested, it's just like, wait a minute, what? Like actually that happened yesterday. I was just like, okay, this is a little bit too much, like why would you show me something I was just thinking about basically? Like, but it could have been random, right? And then I'm just projecting that meaning into it. But yeah, it's complex. There could be ways that we're interacting with it, even though, yeah, I'm not saying that the algorithm is somehow aware in that sense, but it can be freaky.
Yeah, I don't think it is aware, but maybe out of what you've been seeing and posting, they just sort of like made a little pattern and little algor like formula and thought maybe that's based on what you were watching already. You might like that. But
Hmm.
I just had a thought. I know whether we haven't talked about it, but it's almost like AI might be the distraction from what we were supposed to be going to the higher consciousness, to actually developing telepathy, developing better connection with the higher consciousness, um, instead of trying to, yeah, I don't know. I feel that could be sort of like purposeful redirection.
It could be. I also feel like it's had so much momentum now for so many decades. Like this whole AI project, you can definitely trace it back to the 1940s. I'm trying to remember the names of the guys that wrote this paper, but that's when they first made this explicit link between, oh, our neurons and the, binary logic. Um, but this also goes back to how we were talking about the aphantasia, people who don't have mental pictures or they can't do mental imagining. And I feel it's really indicative of like two paradigms of people here, maybe, where if you can't like already imagine it for yourself, if you can't integrate, because that's what imagination is, right? It's an integration um of something before it needs to exist in like 3D density. You're already able to integrate it. But if you don't have that ability, you might need to spell things out one at a time in a 3D sequence in order to even make an integration. And that actually kind of explains a lot with like, so a lot of these tech developments, and then like 1 year later, like the founders like, oh my God, like now I'm gonna write a book like warning everybody about what I just did. Like, oh my God, like as if you couldn't have like put that together yourself, like
Mm.
before doing a certain thing, right? And for me, I just feel like this checks out, it tracks. This ability, this lack of ability to have that kind of mental or visual integration in advance is linked with like people who are very, very dependent on like language and needing things to be spelled out in like
Mm.
in a sequence. Like you have to see it in 3D, like you, if this is making sense. Like
Yeah,
whereas a lot of more, there's all kinds of arts, right? So I don't want to just say artistic, but like a lot of like really deep artistry and creativity and intuition is obviously, it's on this more integrated spectrum, right? Like
that's true.
images are integrated, language is not integrated. Like the best you can do in verbal language is like a symbolic word, like something really abstract, like
Yeah.
I don't know, like a big concept like freedom, maybe it can mean a lot of things, but that's the best you can do. Whereas with an image, you can get very deep, very symbolic, very rich.
Mhm. But yeah, I don't know if you try to do some pictures, make some pictures out of with the AI. They all somehow comes out very like very similar one to another. So it's almost like someone who has no intuition and no consciousness tries to paint or like draw the picture out of like a couple of words you
Yeah,
put together. So it's I think that's why it's like a big separation between what AI is capable of and what they being gifted or being intuitive or being visual. Uh, Having all that integration inside of you is actually giving you access to. So even
definitely.
yeah, maybe AI yeah is capable of doing a lot of things and but I think it's never going to be equal or superior than a telepathy or just that integration, intuition, and connection with a higher consciousness, shared consciousness.
Mhm. And integration is one of the elements that I really like identified with giftedness, like just completely independently from my own like observation and synthesis and intuition of my own experiences. And so what the way I described it was that a key component of this type of giftedness is it's kind of an innate drive for like higher forms of integration continually. So we don't stop at like a given system or a given like paradigm for understanding the world, but obviously we're always already questioning beyond that because we are constantly connecting it with other domains or connecting it with seeing it in all of its aspects, which naturally will like cause us to go beyond just a given like framework. And so it's kind of this continual integration. And in that sense, it's on this kind of like more spiritual spectrum, I would say, because this is kind of like maybe my own new working definition of spirituality. It's not like dealing with a specific set of like concepts or like practices even, but it's more like a mode of relating where we are constantly in this process of whether we call it ascension or just this continual integration. Doing that is already spiritual. Like that's that spiritual kind of advancement. Some people don't like the concept of ascension. That's fine, but it's about this process. And
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, there's types of like AI learning, but it's all very delimited in, within these language models. And yeah, it's not based on an understanding.
Mm.
Like, think of like the German word, like Gegenstand, right? Like, there is no substance, there is nothing really comprehending beneath that.
Yeah. And with the language is actually it's really funny because I am fluent in English and obviously I'm fluent in Lithuanian as well. It's and I used and I'm not used to say, but I do say it that exactly the same word in English and Lithuanian, which is like exact translation. If you Google Translate it, it means different things for me. It has a different. I say it has a different vibrational value to it. Same word, translation, Google Translate it, but for me it means different things. So it's like it's almost like even the language itself, it has a vibration. The word itself has a different vibration. And for me, it's almost like a feeling that word rather than seeing it as written. And you know that can be related with dyslexia. With a lot of neurocomplex people, they do have dyslexia because they don't see the words as they're written. Maybe because we actually feel it. Maybe we
Mhm.
feel the vibration of the word
The
itself.
image of the word,
Yeah,
maybe. Hmm.
yeah.
Yeah, that's a cool reminder too, because yeah, I was sounding like I was just like dissing language itself, but there's a whole added aspect to language. And this is where we talk about like the synesthesia too, which is common to a lot of like neurocomplex people. Yeah, like what you said, having a vibration with certain
Mm,
words that definitely I definitely have the synesthesia, like certain words and letters and numbers definitely have a kind of a color to them. And this is on a spectrum too, right? For some people, like it's extremely intense, very dense. Like they will have sounds, they will have like all these other qualities as well. So yeah, we have so much more that's going on
mm,
beyond or in addition to just like our verbal language. And really, when you start abstracting it into these like large language models, that's all you have is just these abstractions and these kinds of like so-called logical relationships. And that's why you get like these really kinds of creepy images that they're not really based on perceptual intuition. They're based
mm.
on like these logical abstractions of like, okay, like I've seen 100 images of an oak tree and I link that with the word oak tree. And so now when somebody types in oak tree, I just try to like imitate or reproduce like those lines and that kind of thing.
Yeah,
Whereas yeah, like they haven't had perceptual intuition, which is always linked with like our own internal time stream and the fact that we are in these bodies and we always already have this relationship to where we are going and the sense of meaning that we have in the moment because we always have an implicit sense of like the passing of our physical time.
yeah, definitely. You know, I just had like a little idea for download. I don't know how to call it, but you know, the AI feels flat. It feels like 1D or 0D. And where we going, it's not only like the five senses, five known senses, but it's even more senses. So it's more Ds to the thing because it's not only like five normal senses, but the rest of the senses actually connection with the everything what's around us and feeling everything and getting those downloads and all of that. So yeah, kind of now AI feels for me it's just going backwards. Yeah, of course, it's useful
Yeah.
for certain things, for, I don't know, summarizing. Now I learned a new thing. Instead of reading the book, I ask to summarize the book for me, and I make my own conclusions out of it.
Hmm.
But when it comes to like expanding of mind, even, or consciousness, that's not gonna go very far, I think. It's
Hmm.
very limited.
Yeah, the question of summarizing is interesting because, well, where I found it useful is, for example, like if you have to consult anything like a dense instructional manual, like how to, put something together or something, and you're just, what pages is, where do I look? Like, obviously, this is a tool that's like meant for that, right? It can do it really quickly, but you wouldn't want, like, you would imagine asking like ChatGPT, can you give me a summary of, I don't know, like this Terrence Malick film or something, like this really beautiful like art cinematic masterpiece. Like it
Mm,
wouldn't make sense to be like,
yeah,
imagine if you just watched like the last scene or something, like you wouldn't even be able to holographically like put it together. Like
no,
it's certain things are actually about the whole experience of like
yeah,
living through something in the moment, like a moment to moment type of timeline, and accessing meaning and sharing meaning on this moment to moment basis, which can't really like be summarized in that sense. So yeah, there's like this whole interesting role of certain types of art, which is maybe another topic, but also what you were saying was reminding me of like our tendency to use so many of like these like digital metaphors, right? When
mm,
that's not like the direction we're going in, but it's really weird that we depend on them so much. And I just wonder, it makes me wonder about the function of technology because it's a type of our own imaginary projection. And it's like we're doing this in order to just maybe gain another perspective on how we can use our own consciousness, maybe
yeah,
if our intent is not to, like, why would you want to live in some kind of digital format? Like what you wouldn't have experience, you wouldn't be. So it's like, why are we creating? Or is it just that like we are kind of on one timeline, we're one soul group or something, and we're just watching the other one go into like zero density, and then we get these ideas about, I don't know, because maybe it's already happened, right? I don't know.
yeah. Maybe, I don't know, that there are many people talking about it, that the split is happening, and then we're gonna be sort of separated from one another, with the sort of like glass wall between us, so we still be able to see what's happening, and we still see what's happening. I mean, I don't watch news and anything like that, but we kind of aware what's happening in the world, but we are at the same time detached from it. At least myself, I'm not getting like emotionally evolved to it. But that's the thing. That's the glass wall and that separation. We have awareness that what's happening, but we, I don't know, we keep our vibration high, and we rather connect with the shared consciousness instead. And I don't know, from outside, from the other part of the glass, other side of the glass, it might look very ignorant, but I think the ascension, or I don't know what's the other word for that, like, I don't know, expanding consciousness. It's individual work. It's about integrating within, and it's your own work to do it. Nobody's going to do it for you, and it's very internal, I think.
Mhm. Yeah, it raises this whole issue of the timelines. I almost wonder if, I mean, obviously there can't just be two timelines, right? Like we hear a lot of people talk like, oh, it's like if there's just two groups or something, but if we're actually talking about timelines, there's obviously so many. And maybe what we're talking more about when we say that is this sense of just a basic split in people who are on this path of like they want to explore things into further density, which is, this is a good way to see it now. Like going into 0D,
Mm,
maybe that's just what they are here to do. They wanted to do that. And that's just a really different logic than trying to stay integrated or grow your integration. So that to me, it seems like there is a real split there in the sense of this is a very clear kind of like you're going in that 0D direction or you're not, right? You're integrating.
Yeah, but even I think even if you, I don't know, for me, I started to see it that a lot of things which are happening in the world right now, they maybe are pushing certain people to the level that either they're gonna go completely to that 0D or they're gonna awaken. It's almost like pushing everyone's limits, and it comes sort of in waves. And either you're gonna choose to go to the integration, to awakening and connecting with the consciousness, or you're gonna get yourself trapped and go down, maybe even going completely down. That's why I kind of say that it's if you turned that direction, there's no coming back. I believe that it is sort of like coming back, because most of the awakenings and realizing that you're not just this mind or not just this body, happening from traumatic experiences or like perceiving traumatic things in your field, um like almost like being pushed to your limits until you start to something clicks, that something is not working, and you start questioning. But maybe for some people they need to go like down the rabbit hole to the 0D.
Yeah, I think this is a real thing that's happening because if you remember too, in the telepathy tapes, there was the one kid who this goes back to the role of the body, right? Like I feel like he didn't need to be here that long, or he didn't need to be here in so much density because he was kind of like the core of that group and he connected a lot of people to each other here. And he just made a very conscious decision of when he was going back, when he was leaving 3D. And I mean, it fits, right? It's coherent with this idea that you only need to explore density to a certain extent for whatever your purpose was or your intention. And and then that's it. That's enough. And he already obviously still had so much awareness, so much integrated awareness. He was able to do all of this very consciously. Whereas many people who are on like this deep materialist path, like they really, maybe it's the veil is still so thick for them that they need to keep exploring like material density so much that now it's literally in like, how can we actualize like quantum computing chips so that we can
Yeah,
transcribe our neuronal patterns? I mean,
yeah, yeah.
wow.
Yeah, but it's I think it's going all over the borders in every single direction. It's like what is happening with the people's bodies and all the plastic surgery, where it's going. That's one thing. And then all the medication is used to lose weight, and it's almost like, yeah, it's still very materialistic. People are still very concentrated and going over the borders of like limitations, or like exploiting, I don't know, just like buying things and collecting things, and still not feeling the satisfaction of it. There's still, I believe that there's still a feeling of the void, that something is missing in it. Or like, I don't know, achieving certain positions in like in the corporate world, having millions of dollars, and still not feeling that is it. But still, I feel that for some people they really 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 need to go very very far, to almost destroy themselves by doing that, to in order to awaken. So that's why I don't see all these things as bad things, that it's something wrong. I think that's everybody is on their individual journeys, and maybe they really need to push the boundaries in order to awaken or not.
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely agree with that. Like it's taken me longer to really really grow into that perspective, but no, it makes total sense. Everyone is on a very unique curriculum and we're all just kind of experiencing it together. We can like watch each other at the same time, basically.
Yeah.
But it reminded me of a really good example of someone or this paradigm of thinking where somebody maybe doesn't have the mental integration, they don't have mental pictures, and they need to spell it out in physical. So a really good example here, and so if you look at Meta, and go into their company's history back in like 2016, 2015, they were developing like a neural chip division basically where they were literally exploring the idea of like, oh, well, wouldn't it be great if people could send Facebook messages through their little neural chip instead of like, can you imagine? Like, come on, people. And like the one woman who was like advocating for this, she was an engineer and she gave a TED talk and she was like, wouldn't it be great if, like a film director could just like instantly just share their movie through their neural chip basically, and maybe it's great if that's how we could watch it too, right? And we don't even need screens and we don't need people or all of these other things.
Yeah,
And
but
that's just a perfect example of that type of thinking, right? It's like where to start.
the telepathy is for. Yeah, we can do it. We can do it. But in my theory, for us, in order to be able to communicate telepathically, we need to have a pure minds. Because if you're not willing to share what's in your thinking, more you're not willing to share in what's in your thinking, you can't access other people's thinking, what they're actually are thinking about. But that's my own theory. I don't know how much of it is true. But purer we get, less dense we are, and that doesn't necessarily mean that we need to somehow exit our bodies. But I think purer we are, less density in form of trauma, for example, or like all the negative emotions which are heavy, which weights us down, we have, I think more we can access our gifts, which is one of them is telepathy. And we definitely need chips in our heads to do that.
Yeah, no, the chip
We don't need
idea
technology. We don't
links
need
it to a whole
technology.
different paradigm of density, really. It's not even the same thing anymore. It's not, it's like people might think they're using the concept of telepathy, and
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
not
but
even in the same paradigm of what we're talking about, where, but these were some of the questions that I wonder about what's happening with genuine telepathy itself, because I feel like the models that we have for communication aren't really accurate for that level of sharing. So we don't want to necessarily think about it in terms of like having like a sender and a receiver and a message. Like this is how they started that research back in whatever it was, the 1880s or something. Um, but it's something more, it's a sharing on a more integrated level. So and I'm not like I think I've had like like small episodes of this for sure, but I couldn't say like I'm not fluent in this. It's something that you definitely have to develop, and I feel that it probably does relate to having a looser hold or a looser grip on these dense ideas of like individuality and me and my ego, which is really so much tied to the brain anyway, right?
yeah,
There's a whole element of the ego that is basically just brain based. So yeah, you loosen that grip, right? And then that's what you see in a lot of like near-death experiences where they've had some legitimate brain damage, but then they activate all these other gifts afterwards. So people have spoken about this, and it was in the telepathy tapes also. That's how this one woman in the ninth episode, she was able to access the messages from the kid who passed over. So like that's really fascinating, like, and definitely goes beyond like a lot of my personal experience. But yeah, where was I going with this? There is definitely like I have had access to a transpersonal field that was communicating with me, and I shared a little bit of the story like in the second live I did, but basically, or the first one, I had it like this was very soon after my dad died, and I had been like watching a film, and I came out of the theater, and then when it's and it was this was like it won the Oscar that year for foreign film. Like it was really good. And you're in a kind of like dissociated space of a certain type
Mhm.
when after you've been immersed in a film like that. And I was already like in an altered state and kind of communicating with um I was just looking for like a sign, and I was on my own little dialogue, and I forget the details now, but basically like, and you can listen to my first live where I actually have the story, but yeah, I was giving very clear responses. Like it was working like question response in such a way that like you couldn't deny it. Like it was for
Mhm.
me, definitely it was specific to what I needed to see. And it was such a clear, direct experience of that it was like, oh, okay, yeah, okay, I'm not doubting this again. Like, um, but yeah, and then it's a different question of like how you would cultivate that. So I think,
Yeah. Yeah, I totally agree with you about loosening the grip, because when I do it purposefully, it's very difficult to discern between the ego, where your mind is talking and telling you, and what is actually coming directly from the source, from the higher consciousness, from the consciousness. It's very, it's not like, no, it's not difficult to discern, it's easy to discern. But if you want to hear certain things, you're going to be hearing certain things, and it's not necessarily coming from the source. It might be coming
right.
from your mind. But that's why it's loosening the grip, or like losing the control, or letting go the control, is very important thing, because you cannot access it if you are in a state of control, in a state of like, oh, I need this that way. And it has to be like very, very relaxed, very loose, non-gripping, surrendering into the space type of feeling. And in that case, then you can actually purposefully access it. But it has to be certain state, like you said. For example, you came out of the movie theater, and in that way you were already in some sort of altered state, and that's why you were easily receiving it. It's much harder if you, I can do it for my clients. It's much easier to do it for other people. When you try to do it for yourself, that is a lot of ego attachment to it, especially if you ask them certain questions, and if you consciously or not consciously want to hear certain answers. And
Hmm.
that's when then the process is quite funny, because then you hear what you want to hear.
That's what we need teaching and development on because, and if like it's the heart center that is really involved in this type of receptivity, yeah, how do we separate what might just be coming from our own egoic mind versus like a genuine receiving?
Mm.
And how many people are really on that level right now who can have developed that and can teach others? Like I don't think there's a lot, right? That's very
Yeah.
new territory. Like, um, but yeah, I'm just trying to like bring more of our conversation together now to like a little bit like integrating what we've talked about because this all comes back to the giftedness. It comes back to empathy, which I also wanted to say like empathy is not, I think it's much more than just an ability to like share feelings or even just to perceive somebody else's feelings. It is like a full modality of reception, just in the same way that think about how like global vision is. Like for example, in neuroscience, vision is commonly understood as like it's our dominant sense for that reason, because the bandwidth is so rich. Um, and empathy, I think, should be understood in that category too, of it's a type of reception. And so maybe empathy is it's the modality through which intuition works. I don't know, these are very intertwined. Um, but that's kind of one dimension, and then this aspect of having these gifts is another dimension. And I feel that like the neurocomplexity discussion hasn't really been very clear yet on these because it is still working on a very materialist
Yeah.
standpoint from the point of view of like, what are our neurons doing? Like, what is wrong with my brain or something like that? You know what I mean? So
Mm.
this is the side that comes from a more spiritual and transcendent perspective.
Yeah,
Like,
and I think it's very reductionist as well, because everything in neuro typical world has to be put into certain boxes, and this is not working. The boxes are not working here because we cannot put the one person and say, okay, you can go to this box. And I think that's why the traits are overlapping from one to another. And I think that they're trying still to keep it into that certain brackets, and this person is that, and that person is that. But I think what's happening with the kids these days, it's I think most of the kids, if they were diagnosed, and especially in a primary school that age, they would have certain disorder in a way of like being neurocomplex. And I think it is getting out of hand, and they still want to kind of keep it in certain boxes and certain categories, and I don't think it's no longer working. and and I think most of the neurocomplex people are really looking for belonging, are really really searching for the belonging, and being able to identify, okay, I am autistic, or I am ADHD, or I am gifted. It just gives the sense of belonging, because most of my life, at least from my experience, I was one what out. I was weird. I was not fitting in. I tried, and I struggled, and I just, yeah, I always thought that something is wrong with me, that my brain is not like everybody else's. And so I think in one way, as a community, we're doing that. We're trying to like belong to certain category, but also the people who are making these categories are trying to hold on it and not expand it and not merge it. And yeah, because it needs to somehow stay in the way it is.
yeah, this brings up a lot of good points. We were also talking about this component of education, which we haven't touched on yet today, but
Yeah.
this it's funny that a lot of this it has been developed through the lens of education, right? And it's always about the education of like young kids and, categorizing these traits from within that vantage point. That's how giftedness research started. And I'm wondering, like, I feel that, okay, how will I say this? What if we ask, like, so if you think about spiritually activated people who are clearly on advanced on their spiritual path, or they're just even newly activated, but they're very much in their path, would we say maybe all of these are already neurocomplex individuals? Like they are already working, like if you're activating intuition on that level, if you are working with these higher gifts, like that is very much a component of neurocomplexity, I would say, except I don't want to do the reductive aspect where I'm like bringing it down to this neuronal level. So here again, this is gifted, right? Because we're already transcending the category of neurocomplexity. This is more about like, this is being activated, I would say. And maybe like, and I know less maybe in the areas of ADHD and autism, but maybe it's a type of spiritual activation, but it's like being expressed through different types of traits, a different combination of just like genetics express in certain ways. And so these traits can express
Mhm.
in certain ways. And it's not at all about like, oh, you have a deficiency because you're not using verbal language. Like there's one kid who like super high IQ, super empathic, relationally gifted communicator. They just weren't using like verbal language. Like so what? Like,
Mhm.
right? Like parrots can learn that. Like it's a totally separate thing. Like it's not that's not what makes somebody like human or
Less than.
healthy or so I'm just trying to link it more to spiritual activation.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
when I
totally agree.
started writing about this, like I was speculating, I was doing my own processing and synthesis, and I think I had some pushback from people who were really deep in the community aspect of autism, where somebody was suggesting, like, oh, this is really cliche to think about this in terms of spiritual gifts, or, there was some real resistance to that type of approach. I don't know. What have you encountered that? Like, would you,
Um,
because I feel like that's wrong. That's being reductive and just thinking that, we have these little closed communities and
yeah, I think I agree with you that like all the not like all, not necessarily all the neurocomplex people are spiritual people, and like separating one another uh, based on certain traits, which are normally coming from neuro typical people. I don't think it's worth doing, but I don't know, maybe it's sort of a step which we do and then we ascend, because for me it felt really good that I did the test and I scored like maybe 50 out of 60, and I thought, yay, I am autistic. I belong to something now, it felt good at the time. But maybe it's another thing which we should be ascending instead of clinging towards it. And I think we talked about like victimization, and yeah, it's like diagnosing yourself or not diagnosing yourself, and then clinging to that label, and then victimizing yourself and not seeing it as a gift. And I believe that yes, there is a category of being gifted, but I believe that most of the neurocomplex people has certain gifts. And as you mentioned, that maybe there are like different branches of the gifts. What is um how to say it, different branches of the gifts that we have, depending on the category we belong. But I think all of us, we do have certain gifts, but we probably don't even recognize it as a gift because it's just so normal. And that's what we've been living all life with. For example, empathy, one of the things.
yeah, I think the key is this dimension of empathy, this type of receptivity. And if all of these neurocomplex traits were historically found or developed within the context of education, formal education, which is very intellectually focused, it makes sense that maybe a heart-centered type of gift is missing from that discussion. And maybe it is this dimension of empathic receptivity, which activates more of these gifts on a higher spiritual level. So someone who is, like, for example, myself, like I came in highly visually, artistically adept, I guess I would say. I didn't have to like learn things. Like I already had that ability, but I quickly moved on from it because I was, growing, integrating, learning other areas. And so I wonder if that these types of like 3D gifts, the way they present in 3D is like as creativity or intellectual
Mhm.
gifts, and then maybe when we expand more in our heart intelligence, this is when they can kind of like ascend into more spiritual gifts. Maybe the visual component becomes clairvoyant. I don't know. I'm hypothesizing, but I'm very interested in this bridge.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um,
I think it's very interesting what you're saying. There's almost like the spiritual gifts being expressed in a 3D level. But in order for, at least for me, that's how we think. For for the person to have a very high IQ, you need to be connected to the source. I don't think you can have like extremely high IQ and have that knowledge from yourself. because of your very special brain. I think there's a certain level of connectedness to the higher dimensions because of that.
That's interesting because then what about people who are very like, so IQ maybe is a problematic concept, but
Yeah,
we
it
can
is.
think, we
It is.
talked a little bit about people who maybe they are clearly like they have
Mm,
those intellectual capacity, but they don't have any activated empathy. They don't
mm,
score high in that. And then you can see what not good things can happen with if you were
yeah,
only solely operating on
that's true.
this
That's true.
we talked a little bit about that, but like, but that's
Yeah,
the way you said it is really interesting too, because that's more of a giftedness aspect, like where
yeah.
you
The
aren't
same
you aren't
like
going to, yeah, we think about like those conversations we used to have on like, well, what's genius, right? Getting a
mm,
genius idea and the fact that like two different people get the same idea at the same time in different parts of the world, that's kind of this element of giftedness where you're definitely accessing something.
yeah, yeah, or like even being able to draw or paint something. You need to have a very high visual skills, and being visual is already part of the being gifted. And even like being able to put it onto the paper, I still believe that you need to have some sort of connection. And the flow state, what we call it, when you immerse yourself into something, into in the music, like we're talking about the arts and the IQ in intelligence, but there's a music as well, or like other things what people do, and they become one with the source. They have a flow state where the time does not exist, and all that kind of thing.
Yeah,
So
that
yeah,
is
I think it's very interesting.
beautiful. That's a beautiful way to focus this because that's that's where we are familiar from this human 3D
Mm,
concept or vantage point, like artists who really are in that deep flow state. And music is a fascinating example. In the arts, there's discussions like kind of like ranking the arts in terms of like what's the highest art, and music is really like really close to the divine. And like if you go back and read like ancient philosophy, it definitely was at that time. And I don't, and it's not just because, oh, they didn't have, digital media then or something. Like if you are in a musical flow state, like the distance that you're like it's just very direct. Like you're already very close to like these
yeah,
extremely high vibrational states.
yeah,
And today maybe we have more music is on more of a spectrum vibrationally, but
yeah, yeah.
yeah, in theory, yeah, that's definitely what you're saying. And it's almost as if it is a type of channeling, and it's a type of,
Mm,
yeah, spiritual activation, maybe just within like a very specific domain. So maybe the question is like our ability to expand beyond that.
yeah. Um, I don't know. I think it's definitely it's a connection, it's a bridge between uh although it does not necessarily mean that if the art is being produced or the music is being produced, or even someone is very intellectual, has a really high IQ, it does not necessarily mean that they are gifted, because we know that not all art, especially nowadays, is being produced because of the being in the altered states of consciousness. Is probably being produced because someone paid for it and someone just had to do it. The same way as the music, like nowadays music is not necessarily from very high levels of consciousness. And I think the same with the IQ as well, because yeah, with IQ, I don't know. I need to think about it. I think a little bit more, but having very high IQ, it needs to be some sort of connection with the higher consciousness. But then it does not explain why certain people with very high IQ doesn't have empathy.
Maybe there's a range. I started to get an image of like there's like a electromagnetic range. I feel like what you're talking about is maybe very, very high, right? And then at that level, it's obviously true. So
Mm.
you see with biographies of some some scientists like in an earlier age of science who are definitely like they are getting downloads in their dreams
Exactly.
about exactly
Exactly.
what to test, what the relationship is. They're
Yeah,
getting it in their dreams. So that's that
exactly.
level you're talking about. And then now I do think that there is maybe it's more of a more mundane level where it's kind of like, yeah,
Hmm.
yeah, like this is why the IQ test itself is it's very
Yeah,
debated in psychology, of
exactly.
course, but yeah, like there are definitely we can think of like certain tech leaders maybe who were like intellectually gifted, we could say in a certain way, and then
Hmm.
are clearly not really activated at all on a heart intelligence level. One cool thing that I was reminded of thinking about going back to our like holographic discussion and this sense that in certain art forms there's more consciousness is present, really, to put it that way. I can look at like paintings, earlier paintings from like the 19th century or well, in any period really. And this might be like even start to get into like a past life type of
Hmm.
topic, but there is a holographic component, I think, like, and this is my own unique receptivity, but I get other energetic information from, whether I'm looking at like an early like Manet or something or whoever it is, like, um, and that information even comes through digitally. Like if I see, I really like to look through different paintings on Instagram, for example, because there's something unique in the way they translate. And I'm just getting extra information. Like I don't know, I would like to spend more time thinking about that, but I feel like it's related to this. Maybe it is a past life thing for me being related to that area at that time, or whether this is all happening simultaneously.
Yeah, that's another question.
Hmm. And the telepathy tapes discuss that as well, right? This simultaneity theory, the
Yeah,
so-called past of past lives are actually still
yeah.
simultaneous right now. And that raises cool questions too, because it's like, what are you meant to integrate here if this is how you're
Everything is
experiencing something as
yeah.
past?
Or the future as well. So yeah. Yeah, that's one thing which I still keep thinking about. Why this hologram? Why we seeing this particular hologram? Because if everything is happening, yeah, I think it's this. I think it's part of probably string theory. Not string theory. Which theory? This is a form of
I think they have so many variations of it now.
yeah, yeah. It's like which hologram are you seeing? Although everything is happening, all the past lives, all the future lives are already happening at the same time. Why is this particular hologram I am seeing right now? And what then at the end of the day, am I integrating then? If it's everything has already happened, maybe it's like moving through the timelines, but yeah, that's
Hmm. Yeah, it's really cool. I mean, so there's like the theory of the block universe, but I think that's been kind of falsified because the idea was like all possible moments are already contained within like this shape, right? Like it looks like a box. Well, think about the plausibility here. Like this is a good way for us to sort of imagine things, but even then you got this block that's existing, and if it persists in its existence, that's a timeline. So
hmm,
it's not like it can contain time. And that's why we need to take like this kind of like internal perspective, I think, for accessing different timelines, because I think approaching it from an external point of view kind of probably leads to like some kind of like logical,
yeah.
there's a word for it, logical absurdity. It's a type of like logical problem.
Yeah, we're
So
we're trying to think about this through our very, very narrow minds, and I don't think it can be understood from that perspective.
mhm. Yeah, we have like a projection of time here in 3D, and we're using that as our metaphor for imagining
Mm.
higher dimensional sources or projections, expressions of time, and that's just going to be limited. So
Yeah,
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 time is like a huge topic. But yeah, let's maybe like just wrap this up because like we've really been like winding around. Let's see. Like, do you find that like some of these topics, like, are they relevant for you in your healing work? Like working with, I don't know if you wanted to talk about like theta healing. Like, do you end up doing like, do you access quantum fields? Do you access like, are you accessing what kinds of higher fields in that type of work? I'm not really as familiar with that one, but if you want to talk about that, like, that would be cool.
Yeah, it's one of the things which I find it very difficult to talk about myself because I've done a lot of things in life, and just to kind of reduce it to a couple of sentences is very difficult. The same way it's very difficult for me to talk about the theta healing because it's called the healing, but it's I don't know how to, it's spiritual healing, but it looks like more like a therapy, but a therapy when I'm getting downloads and the questions are being asked from the higher dimension, from the source, from the quantum field, however you want to call it. But yeah, the aim of the theta healing is to reprogram the subconscious mind, and we do that through being in the theta brainwave, which is the brainwave from which we connect with the higher source or God or universe or shared consciousness. Um, and we use very short meditation to get there. And from there, from that state, I am getting the downloads. I can scan the person. I can tell what is going on in their lives. And if they, for example, if people come to my session, they have a specific question. So I do scan them. I see them as a little hologram. Um, and also I get a download. I get downloads. What is it about? Why I need to start? What question do I need to ask them to start with? And it's a lot of trust doing that because I don't get the full picture. I get only one question at a time or one sentence at a time, and then I communicate that and I get the feedback from the person I'm working with, and eventually we resolve the issue. And normally we do it through the childhood situations, because you probably know that when we are developing, we're going through different brainwave states. So um, a delta, theta, alpha, and beta eventually.
Could
But
you
in
could you say a little bit about that? I don't know if I've heard that, on a developmental type of
oh, okay,
trajectory. Like, is it
yeah,
certain age range for each one, or
mhm,
how does that work?
exactly. That's how it goes. So from when we are born, to the age 1 or 2, 1.5, 2, we are in a delta brainwave. So we are sort of in like dream-like state. And as adults, we are, when we're sleeping in the deep sleep, we are in delta brainwave. Then from 2 years old to 5 or 6 years old, depending on the kid's development, we are in a theta brainwave. And that's when we are very malleable, and we perceive everything as truth. So that's why at that age, kids, when they're playing, they feel that it's real. And when I always said to the kid, he perceives it as real. So for example, if somebody told you that you're stupid or not intelligent, the kid takes it as truth. And in that state, from like 1.5 to 5 or 6, that's the main programming or pattern creation happens. And 90% of it, in fact. And then only 10% we develop a bit later. But then these programs and these patterns, basically we keep repeating and keep repeating and keep repeating.
So what
So
comes up, just really quickly, what comes right after that one?
uh
After like age
alpha,
7 to alpha
alpha,
to
alpha
like,
brain. So it's like mindfulness meditation. let's say. That's what we are in that state. In theta brainwave state, we as adults, we are when we falling asleep and when we waking up. So that's why this is our brainwave when we actually can reprogram ourselves. So when you're just waking up, when you're falling asleep, whatever you tell yourself, it becomes truth. It kind of we can relate it to like a neuro development in a way, like neuron development. Then new neural pathways are being formed.
Yeah,
Um,
this makes so much sense. I don't know if I've come across that before. That's wow. So the alpha state would be age 7 to,
like 6 till like I think 11,
and
12
then
or
does it
10,
go to
10,
like
12.
beta or something?
Then
Or
beta, and beta is a spectrum. You can be like now we are in a beta brainwave because we communicating, we exchanging ideas, we're learning.
it's
Um,
social.
is social and is active, so your brain is active and is active in perception and is active in cognition and all of that. But the high beta, what happens with high beta is fight or flight, is stress, anxiety.
Hmm.
So most of the population is in high beta right now, and they cannot come off it. So that's why, for example, just start with the healing journey, or um, in general, just like stabilizing, like calming yourself down. Mindfulness meditation is good because it actually calms you down, and you get to that like calm and relaxed state. So that's why in theta healing we use a theta brainwave to reprogram those patterns formed in the childhood, in those couple of years of the childhood.
So it
And
would work really well with like coupling it with a more explicit form of working with the inner child. Do you
yeah,
think?
yeah,
You
yeah,
probably do that.
that's
Yeah.
exactly that's yeah, that's what we pretty much do. We work with inner child because we work with the person, well, not with the person, but we work through the memories of mostly from the 1.5 to 5 years old, of that period of the time, because that's when the program's being formed, is being formed. And
This is so fascinating. I can tell this is where like it touches on so much, right? This is like,
yeah,
because that's literally that's when we're forming, like we're integrating with the 3D matrix at that moment.
exactly,
So
exactly, exactly. We're understanding what the 3D matrix is, because in alpha we already are in yeah, we already kind of in the matrix, but we still kind of chilled at the time, not
hmm
stressed yet.
hmm I mean,
um
it definitely fits with like some inner child explorations that I've done, and many people who have noticed that like we really return to like age 7 or 8 maybe, or maybe it's a bit
yeah,
earlier, when we're
yeah,
like
I
really
mean
connecting with our
it's
inner child.
expandable. Mm.
It's expandable.
Yeah, I mean it's not necessarily from that age to that age, but it's we need the brackets, we need the box to put in, but
hmm
more or less that.
Yeah, but it
Yeah.
makes sense, the idea that it could be connected to a certain dominant brainwave state at that time.
Mm.
And or maybe even like the transition when it happened between theta to alpha.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Okay, I love this. I love that
yeah,
topic. Oh my God.
yeah,
Yeah. I have to like
yeah,
dig
and
into that a bit.
mm, and the good part of it is, because you probably know that we don't remember everything. Is like probably like 5 or 10% what we consciously remember, and through that state, we can access memories which was hidden, which we were not able to remember. Or for example, if you would remember certain event in your childhood, you would remember like just that little thing happening. And through the healing, we are able to access before and after that event, what was happening, why you were there, for example, crying or I don't know, sad or something like that. So we are able to access what was happening before and what was happening afterwards. And the magic of it is that we can actually change it. And the changing is happening when we realize what we had learned from it and
Hmm.
what we received from it as a value, or how why that particular event was valuable for us. So
Do
when we
you have you noticed if, sorry,
no
have
no
you
it's okay.
noticed if like with some clients, do maybe some people may go through some of these brainwave states at an accelerated pace? Do you think does that ever happen? I mean, because I just
um,
wonder if that's related to like this giftedness, this type of integration process as well, or if maybe
um,
this is just still more physiological and more universal on that level. Like we probably spend 4 or 5 years in theta state.
um,
Because I was just
I
getting
have
the
not
impression,
asked that question, to be honest. I never thought about it in that terms, but there's another explanation. In theta healing, we say that there are three types of consciousness: the child's consciousness, the adult's consciousness, and wise man's or wise woman's consciousness. And I don't think it's related with brainwaves, but sort of developing. You're supposed to be going from the child's consciousness, then the adult, and then and the wise one. But a lot of adults, they are stuck in child's consciousness and they never progress. And a lot of gifted people actually born with already either the adult's consciousness or wise man's consciousness already.
it would make sense with, like thinking of people who maybe like they already know their life purpose. They're already like there was no veil.
Yeah.
They didn't really have spiritual amnesia for very long. Like they just
Yeah.
you see them whether we maybe we call them like prodigies if they have artistic skills or something, but like they already, yeah, they have like such highly integrated awareness. They never lost it. Whereas a lot
Yeah.
of people in a lot of those cases with like the kids who still have past life memories, or even if you don't want to
Mm.
say past life, they're coming in with very specific knowledge. You can't deny that,
Yeah.
whether they already know like two languages or they have like really very specific
Yeah.
memories, knowledge
Yeah.
from things they didn't experience. So, and then, but a lot of that is lost like at a certain point of
Yeah.
development. And I feel like that could be very linked with like this transition between theta and alpha.
Yeah, but I think it's something to do with the with the parents as well.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
So if the parent is actually working around those memories and those skills instead of trying to kind of uh, dim it down or try to normalize the kid, not allowing the kid to be the kid, even though the playing and pretending something what is not there, seeing things. If it's shut down, it's shut down and it's lost until we start to reawaken it, I think. So I don't know, I'm wondering what would happen if having a child and letting the child not like continue be in that theta brainwave, but let it not, at least not trying to shut it down and dim it down somehow. What would
Not
happen?
trying to like superimpose like this more of like the social matrix on them sooner.
Mm-hmm.
I used to think like a lot about this kind of stuff, like when I was still, I don't know, like teenage years, like I had a very strong intuition about like these developmental sort of educational moments, like,
Yeah.
yeah, where I would thinking about theories of like what is actually happening and if
Yeah.
a child was allowed to like naturally bring to its own development, like what it was working through at the time.
Yeah, we would know what we want from life. We would know what our skills are. We would know what our path is. I think the simple answer is
Yeah,
that
like before
we would
bringing in
know.
like this huge shared hallucination, like could you
Yeah,
imagine if like more children were just like raised in that moment before like the way we start to impose all these like thought forms and everything.
Mhm.
Like it's very powerful.
Yeah. Yeah, I think school does the really good job. And even like if you're
But
looking at
even
the
parents too, though, like even
yeah,
just with all these social concepts we have of like parents trying to say, oh, well, you need to be acting like this or this way because you're a
exactly.
boy or whatever it is, right?
Mm.
Just the
Yeah.
imposition really soon on all of these social thought forms. I mean, yeah,
Yeah.
it's definitely accentuated, perpetuated in heavy school systems, training like
Mm.
that. But
Yeah, it's yeah, if there was something left from you. I remember I really wanted to go to the school because I thought maybe in the school I could feel good, but that didn't happen. Yeah.
oh gosh.
Yeah. But I think the school did a good job completely destroying all the gifts and all what I had. I was completely bored at school. I was dying from boredom out there because it was just an ordinary school. Nobody recognized anything, and I was called that. I was really quiet. I think I was called like the mouse or something like that in concept that I'm super quiet. I wasn't talking because I didn't know who to talk to and what to talk about because everything was just boring for me.
Mhm. Yeah, we all had different luck or different circumstances in that regard. But I just want to maybe wrap up our discussion a bit
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
to definitely like for anyone watching this, like to like check out your work if you're interested in like the theta healing um and other of Vaida's work. I'll put the links in the description below. I really think like we did a good job of like tying up
Yeah.
some of the connections with normally these would be considered like very unrelated topics, some of them anyway, but yeah, I just feel like this is a moment when we need to do more active work of like trying to like make these connections. So thank you so much. I mean, I know we'll keep talking, but like, hope everybody listening has enjoyed this. And definitely, I'll encourage you to like leave any questions, comments down below, and we'll reply. And yeah, anything else you want to leave with our viewers before we sign off on maybe something we didn't cover yet, or
No, I
what?
think I think we covered quite a lot of things, and as you said, although some of the things was could seem unrelated, but I think we did a good job relating all of it through the concept or through the idea that it's the empathy, it's the giftedness, it's the intuition and integration, and all of it I think wraps it around uh, very beautifully.
Mhm. We did the work of integration here. That's
Oh
what it
yeah,
looks like.
yeah.
So this is awesome. I'll end it here and we'll keep talking. So thanks everyone.
Thank you.